Happy to bring on now Eric Bossi. He's the 24/7 Sports National Basketball Director. Might be football season, but always time to talk basketball, especially around here in Champaign. Eric, first question I wanted to ask you was just about prep recruiting. This is prep recruiting has been obviously a lifeblood of our business for a long time, been a lifeblood of college basketball programs for so long. But the transfer portal, Europe, which we'll talk about, seems to have changed a lot of things. So, how have you seen prep recruiting change, especially over the last 5 years? It feels like it's changed dramatically.
Yeah, it has changed drastically. It feels like it's becoming less and less important. Almost, I don't think schools are devoting as many resources to guys as early as they are. We're seeing them; they're not taking as many high school players. With the transfer portal, they can get older guys. With international now, which has really exploded in the last year, really, you can get more guys. Obviously, Illinois, you know all about that with the international guys. So it's in a kind of a weird space because it still matters, and I don't want to minimize that it's not important anymore because it's definitely important. But I think that there's just a lot of schools that feel like, well, unless you're a guy who can make an instant impact right away, they almost don't even know how much they want to put into recruiting guys because guys aren't sticking around to develop. And part of that is the ease to move, the ease on the player's part, and the ease to tell a guy to hit the road on the coach's part. So it's not just the players who aren't sticking around. There's sometimes coaches who say, "Hey, we're invested in developing you," and then they get a guy on campus and decide, "No, I'd rather have a 21-year-old, transfer that's a junior." So it's definitely evolving. I think you've probably seen it. I don't know that, recruiting is still the lifeblood of our business, of what we do on our sites at 24/7 at your school site level.
Yeah.
But I think we've seen it probably from our users that they don't seem quite as invested on the prep recruiting either. I see it usually in the spring and the summer. People are living and dying by our event reports.
Yeah.
And now there's still some interest. There's still people that are hardcore, and it's still important that we're out there doing it, but they don't get quite the same interest level. I think articles on, let's say Jasiah Jervis just set his final eight, right? It doesn't seem like there's as much excitement at Illinois or Oregon or whatever school it may be about him setting him in the final eight as there would have been maybe a couple of years ago. So it's kind of an interesting space that we're all figuring out together on how to best cover it and how to best serve our people. But it certainly has changed quite a bit. I think there's been more change. I'm in 26 years deep in this now. I think
Yeah.
there's been more change in the last 5 years to this space than there was in the previous 20.
Totally agree with you. And I'm finding, how much do we invest in going on the road and seeing some of these things? It's very useful always to be around people, to be around the players, be around coaches, the parents, all that. But it feels more long-term investment, and you don't know if whether it will. I mean, because when we got into this business, this side, especially, it was like Jeremiah Tillman and Mark Smith and all these guys that it was such a long-term thing. It was like a 2 or 3 year process with a lot of these kids. Now it all seems like it's April, May, Eric. That's when our recruiting transfer portals is when people care. So it is completely changed. So what kind of strategies are you seeing from coaches? Because I want to bring up the high school kids Illinois is bringing in. Seems like there's a developmental kind of vertical they go towards. It's like, hey, guys that might stick around for a couple years. Then there's the high. We have to pay a lot. We want a high ceiling guy that could potentially be in the NBA. But then how many of those guys are you going to take? So do you see strategies kind of going around, especially the high major level?
It's definitely changing. Like I said, I think being out this summer, I talked to a lot of guys about, like, how are you doing this? How are you changing things? And it seems that there aren't many schools that want maybe more than 3 or 4 at the most high school guys in a recruiting class. Because it's used to be that would be, 4 guys, high school guys would make sense because you sign 4, maybe 5 guys a year. But now we know that recruiting classes are ending up being 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guys. So they don't want all newcomers. And the scholarship limit has also been increased to 15, which is a new wrinkle. And now you've got NIL. So I think what we're finding is most schools realize, even with rev share or whatever, that paying 15 guys is going to be tough to do. I don't think there's anyone who really wants to pay more than 9 or 10 guys. So how do you fill out that roster? You find some guys that, maybe aren't quite ready right now to help you out as a freshman or a sophomore, but aren't going to cost you a lot of money in NIL, but who understand, like, hey, you're coming in, this is the long term, it shows in the revenue share you're getting, it shows in everything that, like, we need you guys to help fill out our roster and as practice guys, and we're going to hope to develop you over time. So there's a little bit of that going on. Like you said, there's still, maybe John Calipari and John Sire are pretty much the only two guys left doing the, hey, we're going to focus on a bunch of one and done guys. There's just not many other places that are doing that. And there's still guys who want one and dones, but I don't know who besides Shire and Calipari are still making that a focus of their recruitment. But the mileage varies. I know I'm not answering this very well and I'm rambling because there's so many different strategies that are going on. And really it's changing, like schools are changing up how they do it on a yearly basis. You see how quickly Illinois pivoted heavy into the international game. While still taking a guy like a Keaton Wagler last year, who I think is going to end up paying off really good dividends for them long term. So it's I think it's a combination, and you still want the best talent you can get. You still want high level guys, but if you can't get one of those top 25 or top 50 guys that are generally proven to be the guys who can help you out year one, now it's about talent identification at the high school level and guys who really fit you and fit what you want to do and understand the long-term vision of, hey, you may not play a lot early, but you could have a place down the road when we need you as an older guy. So there's a lot of that going on. I think that shows with Illinois in particular. Like, you look at the guys that they've already taken in the class of 2026. I don't think anyone's expecting either of those guys to come in and be an instant impact guy, but you can see some long-term value with them if they fight and stick through to their junior and senior years.
What do you think of Ethan Brown, kid not too far from where your neck of the woods there? Eric Landon Davis, forward out of Iowa. What do you think of those evaluations for Illinois for long-term prospects like them?
I like them. Let's start with Ethan. I think that he's got good size. I think he's probably more of a combo towards 2 at the college level versus a point, which is kind of what I think he sees himself out now. Although he can certainly help as a secondary ball handler. And I'm not saying he can't play the point, but I think there'll be maybe some issues with defending at the point. And then obviously, you are what you can defend, but he can shoot the ball. He's got some toughness. He's got pretty good vertical pop, especially like he's got a really good second jump in traffic, which is a kind of a sneaky thing to help him out on the glass. He can pass, but the big thing is he can shoot that ball, and he's got Big Ten size. And I think after a year or two in the weight room, he's got a good frame to build on that he's really going to develop. Landon Davis is interesting. He's not a guy that I've seen quite as much of, but he'll get on the glass. He can stretch out the floor a little bit. I think he's tough. I think he's another guy who has a lot of room to grow physically, with a good base to start with. He's kind of an intriguing guy. I just think he kind of fits the ethos of what Brad Underwood wants and what his staff wants with guys that they can take and develop. And so I like sometimes some staffs wait around for guys like this until the spring and say, hey, we're going to go fill a roster. But I like that they saw these guys and feel, hey, these guys can help us down the road. Let's not beat around the bush on them, and let's just go ahead and get them done rather than having to try and maybe pry them away in the transfer portal a couple of years later.
You mentioned Wagler, freshman guard that kind of felt similar to Ethan Brown, maybe needs a year to develop. There's very good buzz about him and what he did this summer. You've seen him a lot again in your neck of the woods there in Kansas. What did you see out of Keaton as a prospect that maybe could translate to making a rotational impact?
Size and skill in shot making. He's at least 6'5", got some pretty good length. He can shoot the ball. He's pretty risk averse. He doesn't try and do a lot that he's not capable of doing, which is really huge for a guy when they're coming in, making that adjustment from the high school to the college level. I think, my biggest concern was I wanted to see a little more, at least at the high school level. I just wanted to see him be a little more dominant at times. And also the big question is just physically, making that transition to the Big Ten, because he's obviously a lean kid. He's getting stronger. He's been in the weight room. You can see the progression he's making with his body. But I'm interested to see once the Big Ten season really kicks in and scouting reports kick in, where he's at. But I know I talked to Brad Underwood about him this summer, and he's super high on him. I think he's maybe a year, 2 years ahead of where they thought he might be at this time. I don't think I'm being wrong in expressing that. It's certainly when it's gonna, if he's as good as they say he is right now, I'm gonna be killing myself that this kid was in my backyard and I didn't see it a little bit better. But just things happen, guys. They get better each year. His progression from, say, sophomore year when I first started seeing him to the end of his senior year was astronomical. He was a guy that, spring of his junior year or sophomore, I thought, okay, this guy can play Division I basketball, right? Junior year, okay, this guy's going to be a good mid-major player. And then obviously by the time he's finished, he's a legitimate high major prospect, but one that you thought, okay, he's going to need a year or two. And now, it looks like he might be fighting for real minutes as a freshman. And it seems like they're counting on him to play real minutes. So, kudos to him and his work ethic. And it just shows that, you can be right about an evaluation as a kid on April 15th, 2025, and then totally wrong on April 15th, 2026, because you just don't know how that next year of evaluation is going to go. But, I would much rather end up having underrated a kid than overrating him. So I hope that he's going into the underrated category, because he's just an awesome kid, awesome family. I think Illinois fans are really, really going to like Keaton and grow to, I can see him becoming a fan favorite.
I want to ask you, you wrote about Quentin Coleman here recently, another fast rising guard that Illinois really likes. They're supposed to get on campus at some point this fall. Out of Missouri, another Midwest kid. Illinois is kind of locked in there. What do you think of him as a prospect in his recruitment?
Man, it's not a perfect comparison, but I'm seeing a lot of the Keaton Wagler track here. Guy who's super skilled but not overly physical, who's coming along. I think that Brad Beal elite team this summer that he played on that won the Peach Jam, by the end of the year, they were down to a skeleton crew with just only 6 or 7 kids healthy to play. And I think that really made it so he had to step up and really take his game to a new level. And he's done so. We're going to update rankings here in the first week of September. And I can promise you Quentin Coleman is going to be in the rankings. Not a matter of if he's in, it's just a matter of how high he's going to go. I think he's a legitimate, personally, maybe even borderline top 75, at least, player in the class, top 100. We'll have to see what my coworkers think. I don't know that I'm going to get a lot of pushback from them on that, because you can just see he can handle the ball. He can really shoot it. He's not the biggest kid, it's 6'3", kind of on the lean side, but I think he's another kind of a combo guard that maybe leans a little bit more towards a natural shooting guard. But I see some stuff with his versatility and playmaking that I think is going to continue to grow. I really, really like Quentin a lot. I think that the schools that are in on him have done their homework and see a guy whose arc of improvement is a rapid one and it's a steep one. And I don't think he's anywhere near his ceiling just yet.
Illinois is battling some heavyweight battles here in the class of 2026. Cameron Holmes taking an official visit, you guys have reported. Jasiah Jervis taking an official visit, you guys have reported. Tough competition for both of them. Alex Costanza's already taken an official visit. Dylan Mingo, they've been in on, but so are a lot of blue bloods and obviously power programs. Out of those guys, is there a guy you feel like Illinois has the best shot at, Eric?
I like where they are with Alex Costanza quite a bit. It just seems like there's continually good buzz with them. I like that they're relatively early on the visit track for Jervis. I don't think that guy's going to take all 8 official visits. Maybe he'll surprise him. Maybe he will. But I think we're seeing all these kids set 8, 10, in some cases 12 official visits, and
that's a busy schedule, Eric.
Yeah. It's like it's going to wear those guys out. If I personally, you want to get a guy on campus, right? But I wouldn't want to be the coach hosting a kid who's on a 7th straight weekend of visiting. He's going to be dead to the world. There's just no way to keep processing that much information at the level you need to process it, especially when at the end of the day, it's going to come down to negotiation, right? Like the negotiation is still going to play a huge role in all of this. And, so it's going to be interesting, but I think they're in a decent spot with Jervis. Really like where they are with Constanza. I think Arizona is a pretty big favorite for Cam Holmes on that one. I think they're going to be very tough to beat. Doesn't mean they can't be beat, but I think they'll be tough to beat. So, but they're working. I think they're going to do well. I mean, it's the much celebrated class of 2026 that has been a little bit of a running joke on your board with me for since I started at 24/7 almost 5 years ago. Here we are, the rubber's meeting the road, and I think we're off to a good start with this one. That's right. I also think that the recruiting momentum began building much earlier than the 2026 joke. So that's been good to see.
Yeah, that's a good callback to that one. So our ad guy, Alex, likes to send me some of the product that we sponsor on this show so I can share some anecdotes about the product, which is great. It's fantastic that he does it. But when a cooler full of Omaha Steaks shows up at my door, I get a little excited because they are fantastic. My wife and I ripped immediately into the sirloins and cooked those up just based on the grilling guide they send along with you. So even if you don't have great grill experience, they tell you exactly how to cook these things to perfection. And I got to say, these are some of the tenderest steaks I've ever had. Since then, I've had their chicken breast. I always have chicken in the fridge, but this chicken was some of the tenderest I've ever had. We just had some of the sirloin tips. Just fantastic meat all around. And that's what you get with Omaha Steaks. Handcrafted steaks to other family grilling favorites. They deliver the world's best steak experience. They also have juicy burgers, deli-style franks, meaty chicken wings, and more. And it's grilling season, guys. We got Labor Day right around the corner. And of course, you need something for your tailgates at the Illini football game. There's nothing like adding the sizzle of Omaha Steaks to your grilling tailgate. So stock up now and celebrate Labor Day with the exceptional handcrafted flavor and convenience of Omaha Steaks. Get fired up for fall grilling with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their Labor Day sale and add an extra $35 off if you use promo code Illini at checkout. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $35 off with promo code Illini at checkout. See site for details. We've been paying attention to the international ratings as much as anything here at the University of Illinois. They just came out for you guys in 2025. Eric, I imagine this is tough, right? When you're making these, when you have to evaluate guys that maybe a lot of you guys haven't seen in person. So what is the process and challenge of trying to rank, evaluate some of these international prospects that come from everywhere, different competition, all of it?
Boy, it's tough. It's a whole new wrinkle. It's basically, it used to be, especially, there's a few things with it. Evaluating guys strictly off of film is never fun. You lose something in the being there on hand and having a true feel for size and speed and stuff like that. So that's one. Number two, all of a sudden there's just a flood of these guys when there just used to be a couple of them. And so there's a lot more guys to go through and evaluate. And now add on, these guys are anywhere between 17 and 22 or 23 years old. And they're not just playing like, okay, if I'm evaluating a kid out of the EYBL in high school or, out of the Adidas 3SSB circuit, I know what those circuits are. You know what I mean? I know what the level of play is in there. I'm not too familiar with the B League in Italy. It's not something that I spend a lot of time watching. I don't know what level those other guys are in there. I don't know what level a Serbian call-up league is or whatever. We're learning that. And so there's a lot to learn, and there's way more of these guys, and there's not near the familiarity with them. So we're doing our best with it. We're going to have some mistakes, obviously. I think we're probably going to err on the side of being more cautious than going overboard with it. And also, too, what we're dealing with right now, like, I think we're the only site that has gone through so far and really rated most of these guys. And so
putting yourself out there, right?
Yeah, but also there's some kinks where if you look at it on the site, it's factoring in a composite on it. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of making the ratings look a little bit wonky compared to, like, we've sent them in like this guy's this guy, this. but the order they're showing up on the site yet isn't quite there because of how they're being figured in the composite. And that's just a tech issue that will get worked out down the road. But it's a lot more guys. And what's tough about it and what we're working, we'll get better at this as we go along. But not only are we getting all these international guys coming now, they're hitting while we're shoulders deep in the transfer portal. Been trying to figure out those guys. Oh, we're also on the road every weekend at events. We're trying to keep track of recruitments. It's another thing that's getting piled on top of other things. And it's sometimes you feel like, where's the time in the day to do all this? In an ideal world, I would love for us to be able to say, you know what, we're going to hire an international guy. And, maybe that's where we get to down the road. But, obviously we all work for companies and we all have to figure out, the cost on it. And while it would be a great ad to have a strictly international person, does the benefit of it financially make up for it? But that's getting in the weeds too much. But it's different. We're doing our best with it. It is kind of fun though to be diving in and trying to learn about these guys and learning our mistakes as we go on the fly. I'm glad that we've gotten it so that they're not factoring into our high school rankings and our top 150 there, because it's really
apples and oranges, right?
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to be including a 21-year-old from France or wherever with a 17-year-old from Topeka, Kansas. It's totally different deals. So we'll continue to work on it. We appreciate everyone's patience with us. I know it took a little while longer than we wanted to start getting these ratings in on all of these guys, but we finally had some time where we weren't on the road to really dive in and watch these things myself, Adam Finkelstein, Travis Brandon, the rest of the team, and really dig into these guys. So we'll evolve. We'll get better with it. What I'm interested to see is how it's going to work out. There's a lot of schools that are just diving headfirst into the international market, and they're basically going on off of the word of "trust me, bro" from international agents. And it's going to be real interesting, how many of these guys hit, how many of these guys bust. How do fans react now to, there's already a little bit of detachment from guys coming in and out and not really being able to watch a guy develop and cheer for them for 4 or 5 years like fans have been used to. If a bunch of international guys come in, like, UCLA, for example, they went super heavy international, what was it, 2 years ago, and it was a total bust for them, right? And it really alienated their fan base towards the idea of bringing in international guys down the road. These are all things that you have to consider when doing this. Doesn't mean UCLA will never go international again. No, but if they do, there's going to be a lot of skepticism from that fan base, and there's going to be some pushback. International guys seem to be working out pretty well for Illinois. So Illini fans are all about it right now. But if you get a couple years of international guys not working out, you could see the tide turning a little bit. So it's interesting. It's a bunch of new layers. I think we could probably fill a couple hours just talking about all the difference with the international guys on its own. And I pardon our viewers here. I do have a tendency to start rambling and getting all over the place sometimes. So hopefully I'm not.
I want to mention, Eric, like, what's interesting about Illinois is it feels like Jeff Alexander and Orlando Antigua, at least one of them, is over there every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So I think being over there and seeing these guys along the relationships is really important. And as you know, that's a massive investment.
Yeah. They're invested in it financially and as a staff from a goal and a group of what they want to do. But they also seem to be doing a great job of navigating and knowing, okay, these are the right people to be talking to.
Yeah.
These are the right programs or organizations that we want to be recruiting out of. And these are the right people that we need to be listening to in terms of who we go. And not only have they figured that out, but they're also over there a lot themselves. So they know, they've seen these guys. They know what level they're playing against. And that's a big difference and really, really helps out a lot in all this. They're doing it as well as anybody right now. I think for the longest time, Gonzaga, Tommy Lloyd really up there set the bar on international recruiting. Then you saw other places start doing. You saw St. Mary's start doing some international stuff. A few of the early ones, and then you would see a guy here or there at some of the high majors. But in terms of like other high majors who've really kind of jumped in 10 toes into the international recruitings, there's few, if anybody, who's doing it better than Illinois right now, I think.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the transfer portal. We're several years into this, and what have you guys learned about evaluating the portal? What matters, what doesn't, when you guys make those rankings?
Yeah. So that one is that's Travis Brandon's baby. I obviously help out with it, but he ultimately, the final decisions rest with him. I'm still one of those guys personally who's a little bit skeptical about guys making the move from lesser leagues to higher leagues, mid-major to high major or low major to high major, because I still don't think we're seeing quite as, there's obviously success stories and there's guys who can help. Illinois, again, has had some really good guys that have made the transfer up, but it's a tough thing because the transfer portal is about how much of an impact can they make right now. This isn't about developing you for a couple of years. Now, ideally, you can find a guy that the 2-year transfer is kind of the goal. That's what you really want. Like we see these guys that get 2 years somewhere, they tend to really succeed in that second year. So if you can find a guy that
Terrence
you're going to,
Jr. here, and they're
yeah,
hoping Kylan
yeah,
Boswell.
that second year is huge. And also with TJ and Kylan, they came from high majors, right? They just needed new surroundings, but that second year seems to be where guys really flourish. So I think schools are now trying to find guys that they can hopefully get for 2 years out of the portal. Just one, to get them a chance to get comfortable. And also it's a little easier to establish and maintain a culture in your program when you have guys that have been in there for multiple years. But it's tough. It's year round for these guys now. I mean, I'm honestly surprised that every staff in the country that has the means doesn't have a couple of like old coaches on staff who their job is, you don't get to watch Big Monday, you get to watch the Ocho. You're watching the games that are on YouTube. You're watching, all low and mid-major games on ESPN Plus, and identifying in each league who's what. What we've got going on now is we've got a lot of guys going through and looking up stats in the low and mid-major leagues and figuring out who has eligibility, figuring out who's all league guys, and then starting to work the back channels of, hey, would they be interested in leaving? This is where agents are jumping in because they're figuring out, okay, John Smith at American University is averaging 21 points and 6 rebounds a game. He's 6'8" and athletic. He has 2 years of eligibility. I can get this guy to a high major just off of his stats alone. And so they're sliding into their DMs or showing up at a game. Hey, buddy, you want to get paid to go to a high major? Sign me as your agent. There's so many different things to it. But the transfer portal is not for the meek. I think fans really enjoy it, but it's exhausting too, because it's just so much information thrown at you so fast. And obviously, that's something that we're still working on adjusting with. I think our ratings have gotten significantly better with it. I joke with Travis and Isaac Trotter, who really helps out a lot with that all the time. I think we've got like way too many 4 stars in the transfer portal personally. Yeah. Look, I'm like, holy crap, we have 204 stars or whatever. But, a lot of these guys are all league guys, or guys that were formerly, the high majors are transferring. Most of those guys are guys that were formerly rated pretty highly as well. So you can't give up on the talents. I see what they're doing with it, but it's certainly interesting. It's the hardest thing is figuring out, does a guy fit your culture and what you want in that short of a time? Because, the transfer portal recruitment, there's some groundwork being laid, sharp staffs know in December, January, a pretty good idea of who's hitting in the portal or could be going and which guys they'll want to go after, but you still can't actually recruit them until they hit it. And then it's quick. And then it's a lot about, again, here, the negotiation is the biggest part of the transfer portal. So it's fun. And it's something that, again, is added, transfer portal and international has added a lot to our plate.
I'm sure.
Adds a lot to your plate. It adds a lot to the plate of a fan trying to follow their school. I feel like as a fan, it's got to be kind of exhausting sometimes. I think that's kind of contributed to a little bit of the dip that we've seen in following prep recruiting, because March and April, you get the NCAA tournament. The NCAA tournament finishes, portal. Oh man, now you want me to follow these high school kids too after a month of intense portal? Like I need a break as a fan. It certainly feels like that's out there a little bit. So it's interesting. It's fun. I think we're going to continue to see shifting of staffs. I think that there probably is a bit more of the scouting of those guys during the year than I think. And I think probably a few more places have guys that are doing just that. We're seeing general managers get hired everywhere. We're seeing places hire analytics guys. We're, directors of recruiting, stuff like that. And I think a lot of those guys' jobs is monitoring the portal on a yearly basis as much as possible, so that when the time comes, you're ready to jump into it.
Eric, last thing, and really appreciate the time. I just love getting outsiders' perspectives of this. And I know you said you've talked with Brad just from afar. I mean, you've covered this for 20, 25 years. You've seen Illinois at the heights of 2005. You've seen them dip down to missing 6, 7 straight NCAA tournaments. What stands out to you outside the international thing about Brad Underwood and the program he's building?
I just think that all the most successful coaches don't really seem to give a rat's ass what anyone thinks about them at the end of the day, in a good way. And I get that vibe from Brad and his staff. Like, yes, they want their fan base to watch. I mean, yes, they want people like him. But at the end of the day, like, he's been unafraid to do things his way, to empower assistants more, I think. Like, he's given Jeff and Orlando a lot of leeway. They go out and do, whether it be in the portal or overseas and stuff like that. And, when you're talking about guys who are control freaks by nature, coaches, that's not the easiest thing to do. So I think he's shown a lot of flexibility in the way he's moved. I think part of it is, Brad comes from a junior college background. And so I think he likes recycling a roster and having to find a bunch of guys. I think it kind of gives them some juice to keep going. So I just think that they've found some things that work for them. I think they play a fun style of ball. I think especially here, I think we've always talked about what the Illinois program can be, not only on the floor, but off the floor, and recruiting and just overall visibility. And I think for the first time in a while, we're seeing a coach who has really been able to tap into that and really understand not only what he's working with in terms of history and resources and stuff like that, but also the fan base and what they want and what really makes Illinois basketball work. And, I think that they've done a tremendous job of building the program. And, I can't imagine anybody else would have done a much better job than they've done over these past few years.
Eric Bossi, 24/7 Sports National Basketball Director. Really appreciate your time, and really appreciate you kind of taking us in, because I know the fans and subscribers love hearing about what goes into these processes for ranking guys. So really appreciate you doing that with us and giving us all your insight, man. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you. I appreciate you having me on.